All right. So earlier today, I was asked about target selection. I mean, specifically CV target selection, but target selection in a CV, target selection in a surface ship, they're not drastically different. It's really looking at what's going on, what's important. So I tried to think of what are the different instances that are worthy of consideration in target selection. So for one of them, killing a ship. So we'll go ahead and put this down. Doing damage to a ship doesn't necessarily stop the ship's ability to shoot back. Often a ship can sink while having full access to its guns, full access to its torpedoes, full access to its consumables if it has any left by the time it goes down. So it's not about damaging a ship so much as it is about killing a ship, removing a piece from the board. One thing that is worth noting on this, with the removing from the board, is if the ship ends up pulling back to isolate itself or taking a position where it cannot assist in the fight, it's not a kill, but it can be marked as valuable in a similar way. So killing a ship, we can address that in a bit. The next thing, map position, which is going to be more of a longer concept, I guess, but we'll do threat and attrition possibility. So what I mean by this is because again, this is supposed to be given from the concept of a CV. So if your CV's down here doing whatever the hell your CV's doing, and there are some island positions over here doing whatever, and you find that you have your ships, however the hell they're gonna be, with enemy ships, however the hell they're gonna be. What this is referring to with map position is how bunkered up, how resilient are the enemy's positions compared to your friendly positions. So if the enemy is using a really resilient places where they can block a lot of the shells, block a lot of the lines, mitigate a lot of the damage, and yet your team is more in the open water or more susceptible to the incoming shell fire, then overall you're going to be losing trades even in an even situation. So if the enemy holds map positions which out-influence or out-trade your team's map positions, then that's going to be something that you as a CV need to pay attention to and potentially try to dislodge. Not the same as map position, but similar in terms of threat, are consumables. So even though two ships may inhabit the same position, one ship may be a radar ship, one ship may be not a radar ship. The radar ship is going to have the ability to influence that area under contest in a much different way than something without a consumable could. So if you're in a lower tier situation, tier 5, tier 6, a ship in a specific spot can be very different than a ship in that same spot that's tier 8 that happens to have radar, even if it's on the same map with the same conditions, same situations. Sometimes, because of the consumable uses, I would say mostly in terms of radar, just because of how extremely powerful it is at locking down a section, hydro does come into consideration as well, but I think radar is probably the predominant one, because if, for instance, the enemy has taken the cap, if a destroyer has to come in or something has to come in and its primary way of defending itself is going to be via smoke, then radar cutting through that it's not that it stops the cap from having its ability to be lost, but it makes it much harder and potentially puts friendlies in danger. Next is going to be breakthrough. What is breakthrough? So typically, when you're looking at the map and you're seeing what people are doing, there's going to be an influence line. Who has ownership of the map? And we'll take kind of a standout color here. And we'll pretend if, you know, we don't necessarily have to fill in all the enemy ships. But as far as for right now, the influence line is drawn down the center. It means that these friendly ships expect that there's nothing on their side, that they know where the line of battle is drawn, and that they feel safe there, so that they can go about doing whatever they're going to do. In some cases, you could have DDs that look to break through in mid, because there's not often something blocking mid. In some cases, you could have a coordinated push, maybe of a battleship. Now, if a single battleship is pushing forward, that single battleship likely draws fire from all of the ships in that area, because it's a battleship. People like to shoot battleships, and plus it's right fucking there. It's moving in, it's close, etc. Most likely, if it's a single battleship, the battleship's just going to get roasted. That's not going to matter very much. The line probably won't be broken, because it'll draw attention. But if there are 2 battleships, or 3 battleships all pushing in a group, if they can break the line and start to insert themselves in situations where cruisers or things that they can slaughter, now suddenly they have angle on them or the ability to push them out, this has a psychological reaction. Psycho, rawr. And now I can't think of how to spell it. Psychological. Fuck. Well, I guess I just have to look it up. But chat, how do you spell psychological? Thank you very much. Here, we'll just go with that, because I'm not thinking of it right now. So we'll go ahead and make sure that we leave that in, because that'll just be fun. Thank you very much, chat. All right, so it has a psychological impact. And what's a good way to kind of model this? So if we think back to World War I. World War I, you might have a trench line and a trench line with a variety of people in it, and it could literally go for kilometers, for miles. Well, if at some point there's a coordinated movement, a breach, this trench line, which is primarily just opposing the enemy, now is flanked, and it starts to become, can you even hold the line anymore? Does the trench matter? Is this just something where you just have to flee? Or do you run away from the break? Do you try to bolster against the break? How do you deal with the break? Similar things can happen in World of Warships, where if a ship breaches, these cruisers, which cannot deal with battleship guns, that maybe they had islands or something that they could protect them from, well, suddenly this stuff is going to push them out. It's going to drive them into the open, drive them out, or simply fucking murder them. Breakouts can be incredibly important and will often happen in lopsided sections of the map, where the enemy might have 6 ships and you have only 4, or there's some form of power imbalance and the enemy decides to push on that. It could be something as basic as your DD, your destroyer on that flank got destroyed, and the enemy has decided to go forward because of it. Breakthroughs can have an extreme effect on what's going on in the map, and can absolutely draw your attention, because if the line suddenly shifts, if your team was not already set to kite out or to run away or to expect the break, you can end up losing multiple teammates in very, very rapid succession. So if you see a breakout happening and it looks like your team is not at all set up to be able to deal with it, you may have to devote resources, despite Group Day A or plane loss, to try to slow or stem the break in an attempt to get another 1 or 2 friendly ships out before they just get straight up murdered. Note, this can also happen in support of your team that are looking to push and break through. Again, you may have a strong flank versus a weak flank, and inevitably the strong flank is going to want to push. The average player feels that when they take ground, they want to push through and run people down, in which case the enemy will try to retreat. Some people may be lodged in, some people may be hard to dislodge, and you can come over and potentially torp in to try to force an angle and move them from their line of cover. And then outside of this is going to be rescuing. And we can kind of label this one as an emergency. So in a rescue situation, you may have, well, of course, just can't do that then. In a rescue situation, you may have a section of the board where it was previously even. Maybe there's a destroyer, a cruiser, and a battleship. Both, your cruiser's kind of bunkered up on an island. You had a destroyer. Oh, your destroyer did something dumb and died. Okay. Their battleship and cruiser are starting to charge forward. Your battleship is starting to run, and your cruiser is pinned. It doesn't have a long way before it ends up getting clocked, and now it's 3v a battleship. Do you just throw the battleship away? Do you say, well, we've lost this flank, I'm done with this, and continue working on something else? It could be that the battleship could angle to the enemy battleship, angle to the enemy cruiser, take a fair amount of damage, while you maybe spot the destroyer, potentially kill the destroyer depending on its health or how badly it plays. And in that I only mean, like, does it light itself with its AA to let you shoot it with rockets rather than having to find it and interact with it and try to force some kind of situation. But if you're able to remove the destroyer off the board, well, then the battleship can stay angled to the enemies and trade with them, and you can continue to assist, maybe trying to work on the cruiser, maybe trying to work on the battleship, just doing something to keep your teammate on the board, which in effect is the reverse of killing an enemy ship. Can you remove an enemy ship to remove threat from the board, or can you rescue a teammate to keep support on the board? A CV affects the map, but it doesn't win the map. Teammates win the map. Surface ships win the map. Now, you can aggressively damage a ship, and you can cause it so that their front line can't push and yours can, which is going to drive their front line back. But your teammates are the ones that are going to seize on that situation. Your hull and your planes are not going to win that cap. You can simply set it up much like a domino falling cool YouTube video so that your team can start to push through and seize onto that advantage. But you still need boots on the ground or boats on the water to be able to take advantage and do something with that. So even though this is mentioned fifth, this is still absolutely important. And if we really look at all this, killing a ship is about removing damage and saving teammates. Map position is about seeing where the trades are unequal and trying to save your teammates. Consumables are actually not so much about saving teammates as they are about being able to take and breach and help with breakthroughs or cap contests. Breakthroughs are about claiming space. So consumables are about denying space, or if you're a friendly team, taking space. Breakthrough, the same. And then rescuing a teammate goes back to helping your team survive the conditions that are going on the board. And then there is another one, which is damage potential. Damage is probably the most basic way to win the game. If you kill everybody, then you win. All kill, no cap, as it were. If you happen to see a situation where there's an enemy ship that is completely isolated, has terrible AA or whatever, well, then you could absolutely go after said ship and deal shitloads of damage to it. But if you have a battleship that has 60, 70, 80,000 health, if you come over and torp it multiple times for 30,000, and then you come back and you torp it multiple times for 30,000, and it heals, you come back, you do it again, you're going to spend a lot of time before you achieve killing a ship. Now, it could just be that you seize on damage potential in the moment, and then you go elsewhere. You do something else. Okay, well, this was something I could do. I went out, I did it, and now there's other more pressing concerns that I have to pay attention to. Some people will prioritize damage potential over everything. They'll simply put it to the top of the list. Where you put that defines your style of CV play. There are some people that are extremely effective at dealing damage, extremely effective at recognizing isolated ships or ships that will soon be isolated and setting themselves up to pounce on that target and deal extreme amounts of damage. But one thing that you have to factor in the damage potential category is you are still resource limited. So while it can be useful to do this, the average tier 10 CV, and this is going to be anecdotal. So the average tier 10 CV is going to do roughly 150,000 damage. That's what you bring to the table. If you start taking trades where you're doing more damage than plane loss would be standard, you can increase this. You can increase up to 170, 190, 210, 220, whatever, especially if you have a fire or a flood that's going to give you additional damage without plane interaction. So you're going to get an additional 10, 20, 30, 40,000 damage from fires and floods. Well, once you set those, your planes leave and they're not just sitting in AA while you're getting this additional damage. You've removed your resources from the situation. You're getting bonus damage effectively. But nonetheless, when you walk in, this is what you should expect. And for those people that may go, no, that can't be correct. If you look at the leaderboards for North America, the average tier 10 CV damage is about 150,000. Some of the best players in the game are going to average around 150,000. Some will have great games where they're over 200. Some will have shitty games where they're obviously less because their average is less. Nonetheless, that's what they can go in expecting to achieve. Which, I mean, if you come down to it, isn't that crazy? You could do 150,000 in a destroyer, and you'll see people that stream often do that. Or with cruisers or with battleships, that's pretty standard. But where you choose to use the planes that achieve this is very important. So if you actually spend 30% of your resources on damage potential, then you only have 70% of your resources for all the rest. So it's worth keeping in mind, is dealing shitloads of damage to said ship going to out-influence the more specific choices above that? And sometimes it's the call. Sometimes it's the thing that you do. But kind of going back to the beginning, when I say priority tree concepting, when people ask me, how do you select targets? How do you know which to go after? It really comes down to a decision tree of what frankly matters the most right now. If you're hungry, you might want to get food. But if you're bleeding from a bullet wound, that might take precedence. Could be. If you're also in a house that's on fire, getting out of the house might be the first option, then fixing the bleeding, then going and getting a Big Mac, probably in that order. So every time you take off from the CV, every time you send a flight of planes, you're going to be reanalyzing the situation and see what jumps out as this is the most important thing at this moment. Some players will try to go, okay, let me forecast 2 or 3 minutes into the future. This is going to happen. I'm going to send 2 waves over here. We're going to do this. I'm going to send 1 over there. And you can do that, but situations are fluid. Plans change. And you're constantly going to be shifting across the variety of different things that are occurring and trying to prioritize the thing that stands out the most at the time.